So today, our agenda for day 2 is we'll take a little bit of review from day 1, talk about some of the key concepts that we looked at, and then we'll have an interactive activity to where we can really test that knowledge that we picked up from day 1. So Will gave us an introduction to the AWWA free water audit software yesterday. So we're gonna also, we just had some static images yesterday, but that was intentional just to slowly introduce you guys. And today we're gonna bring up a live version of the software and showing you around the ins and outs and how to navigate through the water audit software. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to develop the inputs. So there's a step-by-step process that you want to consider when you're ready to start putting the inputs into your water audit. And we're going to walk you through each of those and some considerations that you need to look at and make sure that you're covering when you're gathering that information before you even start punching numbers into the water audit. We'll take that knowledge from that section and we'll have another small group breakout exercise today. So we got lots of good feedback on the breakout exercise yesterday. And so you'll be in a breakout room with one of our Kavanaugh team members. We'll actually keep the same assignments as we did yesterday. We may move some of the IHS folks around just to get a different perspective in the different rooms and work with the different participating tribal utilities on the line. But for the most part, we want to keep the tribal utilities with their breakout room instructor, because these are going to be the folks that you're going to continue working with throughout the program. So we're also establishing that relationship and that connection with your coach. From the breakout exercise, that'll take us to around the midpoint of our time together today. And so we'll take a short break and then come together and review the results, talk about the results from the breakout exercise as a group together. After that, we'll turn an eye towards data validity. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was how we're looking at our water audit results, right? Remember the 3 gears where we said we're looking at our water results in terms of volume, how much water we're losing each day, the value, how much it's costing us each day, and then the validity. How certain are we in the data that's going into our water audit and giving us these results? So we'll have some background information on data validity, where you go in the water audit software to evaluate that, and then some research reports that have been conducted regarding data validity and its importance in the water auditing process, and then also introduce you to some resources that are out there that are available to you on data validity. That'll take us to a summary review and wrap up for the day. So at that point, after we do a review, we'll share a link in the chat box for a day 2 evaluation. And again, I really appreciate everyone's participation in those daily evaluation forms. From day 1, it's already helpful for us to make sure that we are delivering the best program that we can to you guys. All right, so before we get started, just want to open it up to the group here. Any questions that maybe came to your mind from day 1, or any questions on our agenda here for day 2? Okay. All right, well, we'll jump right into it. So this is really the slide where we left off yesterday on our at the end of our session. And we all started with that big picture approach there in the middle of that, the M36, the progression of a water loss program. So we mentioned that, let's see, that looks a little fuzzy there. Let's see if I can bring up a better image for that for you guys there. That looks a little fuzzy.
Coming through a little fuzzy on my end as well.
Okay, good. Thanks for letting me know. That wasn't.
It's not just
me. I don't claim to have the best eyesight. In fact, far from it. But I thought that might have been the case there.
Yeah.
All right, let's try this. Hopefully that's a little bit better.
That's better.
Okay, thanks for the patience there, guys. So in the middle, we talked about the big picture approach to your water loss program. The focus of this workshop is really, you know, we're focusing heavily on the water audit because it is that first step towards effective water loss management. But there's a lot of things beyond just the audit that utilities can start to consider. But that first box there, the annual water balance, that's where it all begins, and that's where we focused our attention yesterday, talking about that mass balance approach, starting from your water supplied and understanding our water audit boundary, where those treated sources, that closest point of entry of those treated sources, are entering our distribution system. And then in that our water balance approach, moving from left to right, we're systematically accounting for all volumes of water that are going into our distribution system. So that's either in our authorized consumption, that's either it's either measured through metering or through some type of estimation. Our billed metered consumption, that's typically the biggest volume that we're capturing in that authorized consumption. But we know that we may have some flat rate customers that are not metered, but they're billed. So we're estimating those volumes in some way. There could be some unbilled but metered uses in your system, whether that is for a government facility or a municipal or government or tribal facility, or perhaps even use at your own treatment facility. That might be metered, but you're not billing for it. And then unbilled, unmetered. So for flushing, for example, flushing is a common use, or fire suppression is a common use of that unbilled, unmetered. So the key takeaway there is that we're accounting for all those volumes. Some of them are metered, some of them we need to estimate, but there's no volume there in authorized consumption that we're not that we're tagging as unknown or unaccounted for. And then we learned that through that water balance approach, that if we take our supply minus our authorized consumption, that's going to give us our water losses. But we don't stop at just quantifying our water losses. We broke those down into apparent losses and real losses. And Will talked us through how those apparent losses can also be further separated out into systematic data handling errors, customer metering inaccuracies, and unauthorized consumption, or commonly known as theft, in our system. Again, some of these, like customer metering inaccuracies, if we have some data, we can quantify that. If we have some analysis, we could quantify the data handling errors. Theft in our system is a little tricky. We know that in some systems that occurs, but it can also be difficult to quantify. So there's a space in the water audit software where we can estimate that through a default option. And then taking all that, once we understand our authorized consumption, understand our water losses, both apparent and real, then our non-revenue water becomes more clear to us. Our non-revenue water, if you guys remember, is made up by our unbilled authorized consumption. So whether that is metered or unmetered, it's unbilled, but it's authorized. Our apparent losses and our real losses, making up our non-revenue water. The common exercise we have, just moving from the water balance up on your screen over in a clockwise direction, the exercise that we participated in really tasked us with you and your instructor in your breakout room of talking through your supply makeup, your supply profile, understanding which meters are going to be most appropriate when deciding the water supplied volume that will be entered into the water audit. Whether you're producing all of your water, whether you're purchasing some of it, or a combination of the both, maybe you're exporting some water to a neighboring community. All of those are taken under consideration, and also understanding the makeup of the meter placement to ensure that we're starting our water audit boundary at the most appropriate place per the M36 methodology. Continuing down with our the way that we're looking at these 3 V's, we mentioned it just a moment ago, but looking at it in terms of volume, value, and validity. There are lots of states that have adopted this approach. There's still a lot of states and utilities out there that are still reporting their water loss as a percentage. But we walked through a little demonstration where where we understood that tracking our water loss as a percentage can be quite frustrating, because it tends to bounce around and fluctuate quite a bit. But it also doesn't really tell us the full story of how we can address our water losses. But once we start to break those losses down in those different components in the water balance, and look at it in terms of volume, and then also value, how much it's costing us, it gives us a roadmap that we can start to prioritize what our next steps might be. We also saw that it's not always the greatest component in your losses volumetrically may not be the same component that is the largest when we're talking about how much it's costing you each year. So you may have leakage as your biggest volumetric component, but your customer metering inaccuracies may be the biggest component from a cost perspective. So it's not always a one-to-one relationship. The dashboard down at the bottom of your screen, Will walked us through that, and the non-revenue water profile that you see there, walked us through and introduced us to the output tabs on the water audit software. We'll take another look at those in just a moment. But just a way that we can capture all of our information and understand how to interpret these results. So just a quick review there of what we ran through yesterday. Again, the primary focus was on the water balance and drawing our water audit boundary, and then a introduction into the water audit software. So want to take a very brief pause there and just see if that review brought up any questions for anybody on the line. Maybe wanted any concepts or any terms to be discussed a little bit further, or maybe any term or concept that you were a little uneasy about or unfamiliar about still after day one. Okay. All right, let me switch my screen here, because since we don't have any questions there, then our next way to review that is going to be our water audit jeopardy, just to check in on the knowledge, testing our knowledge here. And so we've put together our own version of water audit jeopardy, water loss jeopardy, however you want to call it, and hope that this will be a fun way to really reinforce some of that learning that we got yesterday. Now, you guys, show of hands, I hope everyone's familiar with Jeopardy, but is there, if you can just do a show of hands, either with your camera on or through the reaction button on the toolbar, who is not familiar with the way Jeopardy is played?
Can you put that in the form of a question, please, Drew?
Yeah, I'm gonna need another sip of coffee after that one, for that one, Steve. So that is, so to Steve's point, we will give the answer, and to respond, a correct response will be in the form of a question. So feel free to use the chat, although if I sensed a little bit of competition when we were doing the quizzes yesterday. So the faster response may be to come off mute. I'm going to ask the rest of my team members on the line to help me identify who is coming in on the buzzer the fastest. But that's going to be, we're going to track that and keep score, and the winner at the end of it is going to get a surprise to be announced. I don't know what that says, Steve, but
That says Group 2 rocks.
Group 2 rocks. Okay. All right. So imagine we've got our Jeopardy board. I'll do my best to honor the late Alex Trebek here as our host. But we have our board with our categories. We have general category, audit inputs, and performance indicators. And then our point system is 10 through 40 for each category. So I'm actually going to ask Damien, you weren't here yesterday, so this is just really throwing a dart at the board. If you would just pick one of these categories for us, and that'll kick us off.
So just pick one of the categories.
Yeah,
the numbers.
Yep.
Audit inputs 10.
All right. I'm going to go to audit inputs for 10. So again, I'll read the answer, and if you guys can come off mute and just respond in the form of a question, and we'll have a little bit of fun with this. Okay. So audit inputs for 10. Water illegally withdrawn from hydrants, illegal connections, and bypassing customer meters.
What is theft?
All right. I think that was Trish. Let's check it out. What is authorized consumption? I'm going to do a quick check with the judges, Trish, and they're giving me the thumbs up that theft is going to be acceptable there. So yes, so unauthorized consumption is a subcomponent of our apparent losses. And if you remember, our apparent losses, that's the water that's making it to the end user, but we're either not metering it accurately or not capturing the revenue for that. So theft in our system certainly fits the bill for that. We'll see in the water audit, as I mentioned, it's a tough volume to quantify, and so we'll see that there is a default option to help us estimate that volume. There are some unique situations, and Damien and Chris, if I recalled correctly, the water in Mescalero may, if it's your customers are majority of them are unbilled and unmetered. Was that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so when it comes to theft, there may not. I mean, we may that would be a unique scenario because there's not really a motive, right? So presumably theft in your system is low. So we would probably go in there and tweak that a little bit based on that unique scenario. But for most systems, that default option to estimate that volume would be appropriate. All right, so let me mark this off. So that was audit inputs for 10. Let me do that, just make sure it's taken care of there. And Trish, the board is yours to go to the next category. Where would you like to go?
Hey, Alex, general for 10, please.
You got it.
Nice.
The industry standard format for conducting a top-down water audit.
What is M36?
All right. That is close, but incorrect.
What is Excel?
Close, but incorrect. This is the industry standard for calculating, industry standard tool for calculating water losses. And Will gave us an introduction to it yesterday. I don't have the noises, so you guys don't make me do the timer noises here.
What is the free water audit software?
All right, Will. Thanks for chiming in there. What is the free water audit software? Ross, I knew where you were going with that, and Bruce, the format of it, but we were looking for the AWWA free water audit software.
Those judges are harsh, Drew.
They're harsh.
Yeah, comment
and,
on that. That was a little drastic.
Too harsh.
But, yeah.
Too harsh.
And Will, that was I don't even know if a softball question is even appropriate since you're chairing the water audit software committee.
I get no points for answering.
No points on that one.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let me mark off general for 10 here. All right, Will, you still get to pick the next category here.
All right, Alec, let's go with audit inputs for 20.
All right, audit inputs for 20. Unmetered flushing and fire department usage are common types of this authorized consumption.
What is unbilled?
Could you be more specific?
Unbilled, unmetered?
All right, yes, what is unbilled, unmetered? Nice job, Nicole. So unbilled, unmetered, we typical uses there, flushing, fire suppression, but it may vary from system to system. It's whatever your policy dictates is exempt from billing and is not metered. So street sweeping could be another one, but again, it's going to vary from system to system, but those common uses are flushing and fire use. All right, so that took care of inputs for 20. And Nicole, the board is yours.
Let's do performance indicators for 10.
All right, here we go. Performance indicators for 10. Physical losses that never reach a user.
What is a water leak?
I'm sorry, I got two at the same time.
What are leaks?
What are leaks? All right, and who is that?
It's Ross.
Hey, Ross. Okay, great. I'm going to give that to you. We will accept leaks or real losses. So if you remember, thinking back to our water balance, once we determine our water losses as a difference between our supply and our authorized consumption, we are also breaking those down into our apparent losses and the real losses. Those real losses are the physical leaks in our system. And while apparent losses are broken down into further subcomponents, our real losses, the water audit is really just calculating one volume and one value for our real losses. There are some follow-on activities and models that can be used beyond the audit that can help us separate our losses out into different types. But for the free water audit software, it is calculating down to a single volume there. And that center column in our water balance, the authorized consumption, or the billed consumption, the unbilled consumption, and the apparent losses and the real losses, that center column in our water balance, the way the real losses are calculated is really just through a process of elimination. Once the other volumes are assigned and known in that center column through that mass balance approach, our real losses are calculated through a process of elimination there. All right, good job there, Ross. So that was performance indicators for 10. And where to next, Sarah?
Let's do general for 30.
All right, general for 30. The AWWA reference document that describes best practices for water loss control.
M36.
All right, there it is. Okay, Ross, nice job. The M36 manual for water audits and loss control programs. Another, just a big thanks to Indian Health Service for providing these manuals to everyone. And just a quick program note. I know there were a couple of you that we had to get send the manuals out. So we are following up on the tracking to see when you might expect to receive those. But hopefully everyone else has received their copy. The M36 manual for water audits and loss control programs, currently in its 4th edition. The 5th edition is currently is updating this manual, and it is due out, I believe, sometime in 2023. But that is the authoritative source and industry standard manual for all things water audits and loss control programs. All right, so let's knock out general for 30. And Ross is on fire here. Where to next, Ross?
Let's do, excuse me, performance indicators for 20. And quick question too.
Sure.
Is every participant supposed to get a manual, or just every utility?
One copy per utility, Ross.
Okay.
Good question. Yep. All right. Performance indicators for 20, I believe, is what you said. Okay. All right. The sum of apparent losses plus real losses plus unbilled authorized consumption.
What is unaccounted for water?
I'm sorry, Will, and I'm gonna deduct double points from you for that answer.
Fair.
So Will just gave us a term that has officially been deemed obsolete by the American Water Works Association of unaccounted for water, because we all know now.
What is non-revenue water?
Yes, that's it. What is non-revenue water? Good job, Ross. So through that mass balance approach, through the water balance, again, we know that we're accounting for all volumes in our system. So assigning any volume to as unaccounted for is no longer correct. All
Hey,
right.
Drew.
Yes.
It sounded like Rolanda may have been coming in with a comment as well there.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys have a higher voice, louder voice than I do. So, but let's say non-revenue water. So I get half
Great.
a point.
You get half a
So I get
point,
10
and
points?
We can give her the
you
point.
do.
I can share.
You get half a point, and you get to decide where we go to next, Rolanda.
You do. Good call.
All right, performance indicators for 30.
Okay. All right. Oh, gotta take the pen off here. All right. Performance indicators for 30. A reference level of real losses in water utilities that cannot be totally eliminated. This is a tough one. We're not giving them away at 30 points.
This is Eagle. I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Is it systematic? What is systematic data handling errors?
That is incorrect, Eagle. Although it is true that there are some inherent errors that it can be found in in all billing systems and processes. This is actually looking at a reference level of real losses. Our systematic data handling errors is a subcomponent of our apparent losses here. I'll go ahead and open this one up because I think we lightly touched on this yesterday, but this is what are unavoidable annual real losses. So no system is immune to leakage. Every system has it. Will, I think you can correct me if I'm misstating this, but as soon as a brand new pipe is installed in the ground, it's like driving a new car off the lot. The potential for leakage just already starts to go up. So no system is immune from leakage. There is unavoidable annual real losses in every system.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
All right. So performance indicators for 30. And Rolanda, where would we like to go to next?
We'll do general for 20.
All right, general for 20. Water supplied minus authorized consumption.
All right, this is Eagle.
What is a water balance?
All right, I heard what is a water balance. It's part of it. So if we can be a little bit more specific. So if we're looking at our water balance.
Water supply minus.
What are water losses?
Aha. Eagle says, what are water losses? That's correct. Good job. So yes, at that more rudimentary calculation, our water losses are just the difference between our supply and our consumption. And we know that we're not going to stop there. We can separate out those water losses into both apparent losses and real losses in the water audit, and even further with our apparent losses, those separate subcomponents there. All right, good job, Eagle. So let me make sure I mark off general for 20. And Eagle, where would you like to go to next?
Let's go for audit inputs for 40, please.
All right. Audit inputs for 40. The input where you adjust for known error in the supply meter.
What is the weighted average?
Trish, that is very close. I'm going to open it up to others.
What is meter error input?
All right, I'm going to split the points on this one, guys, between Trish and Eagle. So Eagle said error input, supply error input. So we're looking for that master meter error adjustment. It's available to you in the water audit, whether you have volume from own sources that you're producing, water imported, water that you're purchasing, or if you're exporting water to a neighboring community. There is an input field in the water audit where you can calculate that error adjustment. Now, Trish said weighted average, which is also correct, because if we have, for example, we were in our breakout exercise with Santa Clara, we had 3 meters with one of their systems we were looking at. And if we have some flow accuracy results for all 3 of those meters, we only have one spot, one input field in the water audit to enter that. So we're not going to take just a straight average of those test results. We need to weight that based on the percent of supply going through each meter. All right. So inputs for 40 closes out, or no, inputs for 40 here. All right. So Trish, I'll let you decide where we're going to next.
Let's finish out audit inputs for 30, please.
All right. You got it. Audit inputs for 30. Treated water purchased from another system.
What is purchased water?
Very close, Rolando. Looking for the input term in the water audit. So in our water supplied, remember there's 3 different possibilities for water supplied. One of those is volume from own sources, water that we're producing. One of those is water exported, if we are exporting water to a neighboring community.
What is water imported?
What is water imported? All right, Nicole, great job. All right, inputs for 30, we have closed that one out. All right, Nicole, where to next? We have general for 40 or performance indicators for 40?
General for 40.
All right. Outdated terminology describing water losses no longer used in water loss programs.
What is percentage of water loss?
I'm going to give that to you, Trish. What is percentage of water loss? We'd also accept what is unaccounted for water. So that's,
Drew,
yes.
I'm going to lobby for double points on that.
Double points.
She wouldn't even name it. So, I mean, that's double points to me.
Right. Yeah. We did say it's basically a four letter word in the water loss industry. But we know that, again, through our water balance approach, that there's no volume that is now categorized as unaccounted for. And then to Trisha's point, with percent of water loss, where that's one significant change in the version 6 of the water audit software. There's no percentage-based metrics there. We're no longer tracking water losses as a percentage of our supply input. Understanding that percentages are easy for folks to talk about. It's easy to talk in percentages, but when we're looking at our water losses, it really doesn't give us a whole lot of insight as to how to approach our water losses, how to intervene in our water losses. But by looking at it in terms of how much water we're losing volumetrically and how much it's costing us each year and where those biggest volumes and costs are occurring, now starts to give us a plan to where we can prioritize and focus our areas of attention. All right. Great job there. All right, so I'm going to open it up. The last one here, performance indicators for 40. The ratio of current annual real losses to the unavoidable annual real losses. So Will mentioned this one when he was showing us the screenshot of the dashboard tab in the water audit yesterday.
What is infrastructure leak index?
All right, great job, Ross. What is the infrastructure leakage index? So this is how we can gauge the leakage in a system. So just as a reference point, a 1.0 infrastructure leakage index would be the technical minimum level of leakage that we would expect to experience in our system. So if you go through complete the water audit and your infrastructure leakage index, or ILI, you may hear us say sometimes, if it's 2.3, then that simply means that the leakage is 2.3 times the technical minimum level. All right, you guys did awesome in that. That is, you guys are on top of it, and you guys are all water balance certified at this point. All right. Did that bring up any questions? Just going over some of those. That's really just checking our knowledge and our comprehension on those different terms that we discussed, either in the water balance or specific input fields in the water audit software. But did any of those questions bring up any questions that anyone would like to discuss further? Yes, Ross.
I'm not so sure the questions brought this up, but just something I was, excuse me, I was thinking about is it costs real money to pump the raw water. So I'm a little surprised that that's not factored in anywhere in the water audit of getting from your source, your raw water to your treatment point or into your distribution, into your system. You know, we have wells that we're pumping raw water from the wells, and then it may hit raw water storage, and then it's pumped out of there. If there's loss in those lines coming in, I'd like to know about that. And it's a little bit surprised it's not being accounted for anywhere in the process. Gotcha.
I'll speak a little bit to that, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the team members to add on anything there. So when we're looking at valuing our losses, we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail today, but Will introduced it to us yesterday. When we're valuing our losses, our real losses specifically, we're looking at the cost to produce an additional unit of water. And so if we are purchasing, if we're purchasing some raw water, then that could go into the understanding how the value of those real losses. Looking at but specifically the cost for chemical to treat it, and the cost for power to distribute it through your system. So, you know, going through that water audit boundary exercise yesterday, we learned that, or we acknowledged that finding those closest points of entry of treated sources into the distribution system, that water has a different value than the raw water that's being treated. So that's one take on it. I'll open it up and see if any of the other members have something to add there.
Yeah, Drew, I'll jump in. Ross, it's a good point. You actually are correct on the cost for getting the water extracted from the source to the point of treatment. That does go into evaluation of leakage in the potable network. Drew, you're also correct that you can do a standalone audit, a water balance between the raw source and the point it gets treated. If you have you know, some spread of transmission line or something like that's spatially, those are spread out, you could do a standalone water balance and just value it at that raw volumes and then the raw pumping costs. But when you are doing the audit that we're doing in this program, Ross, to answer your question directly, we will factor in the cost to pump it out of the source. Those pumping costs do get factored in. Did that address the question that you were asking, Ross?
Yeah, essentially. It's just thinking of some of our systems. Most of them are pretty simple, but we do have one where we have some distance of line, and I just want to make sure that's somehow that's going to be accounted for, because obviously if you have a major leak on one of those lines, or an ongoing leak where you're losing a lot of water, you'd want to try to pinpoint that somehow. So, we have meters on those production wells, and then it hits a raw water tank, and then it's pumped out with a booster and chlorinated, and that's metered at that point as well. So again, comparing those two, the 3 meters from the wells and the booster meter, if I'm seeing a big difference there, I know I've got a leak somewhere. I'm losing some water. And
yeah. In that case, you probably would want to do a standalone audit just from raw source to the booster, or to whatever that point of treatment is. Ultimately, though, we want to be real consistent on our boundary, where we draw that boundary. So yesterday we went through that exercise of drawing boundary meter, and we just have to have that starting point. Typically, if you do have a raw system that then turns into a potable system, and you would do 2 water balances if you were concerned about physical leakage on the raw side of things. That's more of the best practice, but you can use the same tool, you can use the same principles, the principles that we're using for this potable water balance. You can use those on a raw system as well.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
All right, just a quick scan to see if I had any other hands up. Any other questions in the chat? I don't think so. Okay, fantastic. Good question, Ross. Keep the questions coming, guys. And we'll also seek for some natural pause points here in the presentation to facilitate those questions and answers. All right, so Will gave us a introduction yesterday to the water audit software, and we were just looking at just some screenshots to get everyone oriented, but we're now going to bring up a live version of the water audit software, and just kind of give you guys a quick tour around. All right, just making sure that you guys are seeing the water audit software now.
Hey, Drew,
okay.
one comment. It does look good on the screen.
Mhm.
One comment back to our Jeopardy game. If you're able to sort of look at those precise definitions down the left side when Will goes through that, I mean, that's a tie back to why we were sort of holding on those terms, because we're trying to reinforce those terms within the free water audit software.
Great. Yeah, that's a good point, Steve. I think Rolanda said purchase water, and the answer was water imported. And yes, they're one and the same, but it's all an exercise to start talking the same M36 language. So very, very good point there. All right, so before I even jump into the water audit, I do want to show you guys, if you haven't found or downloaded a copy of the water audit on your own yet, there's several places, several links that we've provided where you can get to that, but they're all going to lead you to the AWWA water loss control page. You can simply type AWWA water loss into your search engine, and it'll bring you to this page. So this is the AWWA water loss control page, and if you scroll down, there's a lot of great information on this page, and I encourage you guys to look at it as you have time. But the first tool under here for tools for water audit analysis is the AWWA water audit software. So we'll click on this link here, and it will take you, give you a little bit of information and let you know that It is the new version has been released. Version 6 is the current version, and that we'll be working with in this program. It was released on December 4th, 2020 on World Water Loss Day. And so this will show you just really the high bulleted points that Will walked us through, the improvements and enhancements that were made to it. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about those enhancements, there's a release memo link here, as well as a really good orientation video to watch here that hits those key highlights with Will and other members of that software subcommittee that worked on putting together this newest version. But in order to get to obtain your copy, you'll need to fill out this short form here. And so AWWA is interested in where throughout North America folks are downloading this copy. So that's why it's looking for the location there on that form. But if you fill this out, it'll just auto populate there. Let the machine know you're not a machine and hit submit. And then it'll take you to a page where you can obtain your copy, download the version 6 of the software in English. For those overachievers that want to download it in French, it's not available at this point. But I think that is in process. There's a previous version of version 5. If you're interested, just out of curiosity, you want to take a look at what that version looked like, then you can download it here. But for this program, we're all eyes forward on the newest version of the water audit software. All right. Let's see. All right, so that is where you can go to obtain the water audit. And so let me bring back up here our blank version. If you forget how to get to that page, there's a link to the AWWA water loss page on our program website on the resources page at ihswaterloss.org, and in the program packet you guys received. All right, so this is the page that it opened up on and the page that Will walked us through yesterday. But even before we go to that, want to look at the start page. As the tab indicates down here, this is a good place to start. But right off the bat, up here, this is a spreadsheet-based tool. So we keep referring to it as a software, but it is in fact a robust spreadsheet with a lot of good tools under the hood. But it's a format that everybody's familiar with. We all work in spreadsheets probably on a daily basis. So it's a format we're familiar with, and we'll see here that we can even pop some formulas or even store some relevant data in this water audit software. So it's a good place to collect a lot of good information about your system. When we open up the water audit for the first time, we'll see all these tabs that are familiar in an Excel spreadsheet down at the bottom. So any of these tabs for easy navigation. We'll also see the key input acronyms over here to the right. Myself, Will, Steve, and Larry on the line are, we are, sometimes we may just use these acronyms just from force of habit, but we can also appreciate that as you're learning this, it becomes a little bit of the alphabet soup game. So there's a nice little cheat sheet to let you know if anything is in reference in those acronyms, what that is actually referring to. Some key information that we'll want to log in here. Obviously, just basic contact information, and then up here at the top. But when we get down here to the middle, we start looking at some of those things that we discussed in our breakout rooms, where you know, we just said that the audit is really bound by two things. It's bound by the boundary that we drew in our breakout rooms yesterday, but it's also bound by time. So we're looking at this at a 12-month basis. So that's either at a calendar year or a fiscal year. So there's places in here where we can look at the audit year. Maybe we want to do 2021, and we wanted to do a calendar year. So our start date there would be January 1st, and our end date there at December 31st. All right. And just a quick peek at when we enter this information, some of this information is going to populate other parts of the audit. So I'll come right back to this start page, but if I go over here to the worksheet, we can already see that our audit year and the calendar year and the dates, the start and end dates, are populated over here into the worksheet. If we enter in our system information over here, then that will also populate up here. All right. Next, very important is we're tracking all of these volumes. We want to make sure that we are identifying the volumetric units that we're using. So just a show of just in the chat, if you guys wouldn't mind, what are most folks of the tribal utilities that are participating in the program comfortable or used to tracking their volumes in? Are you guys mostly tracking in acre feet or million gallons, or does it just depend on the purpose of the reporting? I know Eagle referred to to acre feet the other day.
Yeah, we
Okay.
use acre feet.
Okay. All right. See if a few folks there in gallons or million gallons there. So whatever volumetric unit you want to report in, you have a couple options here. You have million gallons. We got megaliters here for our friends to the north, and then acre feet. And so these are the ones that we'll choose from here. So whatever you want to use, you can put it in there, and then once you put it in here, that will populate over here on the reporting worksheet, that volumetric unit. So a very important note here is, you know, if Eagle puts together his water audit and he puts it in acre feet, and then he, you know, says, you know what, I want to do this in million gallons. So if you go over here and you've got all your water audit populated and you switch these reporting units, it's not going to automatically convert your water audit. So just know that if you're interested in doing two different water audits for two different volumetric units, then I would just suggest doing them side by side, or you know, making those conversions separately. But it won't automatically make that conversion. Maybe maybe for a future update, right, Will?
To be determined.
To be determined. Gotcha. So we said yesterday the M36 methodology is, and to Ross's question earlier, is looking at treated sources. That's what we're concerned about tracking through this this water audit, and those treated sources that are entering in our water audit boundary. So in most cases, and for the purposes of this program, in most cases throughout North America, this system structure will be a retail structure. But we will, the water audit, the version 6 there have been some modest tweaks to make this available to different types of structures. So a wholesaler, for example, the methodology, it still applies. So, just some minor tweaks that we might see in the reporting worksheet to make this available for them. If you have a hybrid wholesale or retail system, you could even, as Will mentioned, you could even use this methodology for a raw water setup to quantify those leaks. But we'll see from a cost perspective how we're valuing the cost in this tool, that we are we'll be applying that based on those costs for treated sources in our system, in our drinking water system. All right. So in most cases, it's going to be a retail system. In most cases, we're looking at potable water here. And then we can just enter in some more contact information. Validator and validator email. So we will talk about data validity and level 1 validation later today. So if you are working with a third party, which you guys will throughout this program, that's where that third party validator will put their contact information. All right. And then we put population served. There's a nice little key down here for our user, our input. So any of the light blue cells that you see throughout the water audit, you can, those are editable cells where you can provide your input there. If you see an orange cell, that's going to be something that has been auto-calculated based on a previous input in the water audit. So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. And then there are some white cells with a dashed border. Those are going to indicate some options for some default options within the water audit. We mentioned a couple of those earlier, such as the unauthorized consumption or theft in your system. It's difficult to quantify, so there is a default option to consider in the water audit to help you estimate that volume. All right, let's see here. All right, so on the reporting worksheet, this should all look familiar because Will walked us through each of these different groupings here. But again, you see the water supplied, the acronyms over here, the different inputs here that we see: volume from in sources, water exported, and all of the different inputs as we're moving down the water audit. All in all, for most systems, 11 to 13 input fields are going to be applicable. So there's not a ton of fields that you're going to need to complete, but those ones that you can complete are in this light blue. When we start to punch information in, so maybe we have 1,000 acre feet. As you see, once you put something in, our error adjustment option is available, pops up available over here to the right. If we don't have any information for that, we'll usually we'll recommend to leave that one blank. If we did, maybe we have some test results and they're off by 3%, and then another box will appear and we need to indicate whether that's an under registration or an under registration. You can see here as an under registration, the orange box that's auto calculated based on previous inputs is already has now accounted for that error adjustment there. So we wouldn't account for the error adjustment in that volume, but we would account for it over here on the right hand margin. Moving down to our authorized consumption, all these terms are now familiar to you guys. These are these water balance terms that we looked at, and over here is the first for unbilled, unmetered. Remember, those typical uses are flushing, fire suppression in your system. This is a volume that needs to be estimated. So if you're estimating those volumes in your system, then you can come over here to this selection and select custom. So you can enter a custom volume. If you're not estimating those volumes, and by the way, that's okay. A lot of utilities that we have worked with are not estimating those volumes, but instead using this default value here. What that default value is 0.25% of your build authorized consumption. So if we have 800 acre feet of consumption, it's going to take that 0.25% and automatically calculate that here for your unbilled, unmetered. Moving down to our apparent losses. So now, if you remember back again to the water balance approach, so always looking for areas to reinforce this, we now have a water supplied volume and we now have an authorized consumption volume. So our water losses are now calculated for us based on that water balance approach. And then we are tasked with quantifying those apparent losses, which will give us our real losses. So again, there's a nice little tab over here in the worksheet that shows the water balance and plugs in your utility specific volumes here. So there's our billed authorized consumption that we put in, the unbilled authorized consumption that we just used to that default option. And then we have some default options calculating our apparent losses. So then our leakage, our real losses through that mass balance approach are calculated through a process of elimination, whatever's left over in this column here. All right. Customer metering inaccuracies, just to note, whatever that percentage is that we put in there, maybe we have some test data and we're able to calculate out a percentage. If we don't have any test data, we do need to put some input in here, and maybe we're estimating that our meter population, maybe it's a little bit of an older population and we're estimating them to be 3% inaccurate. Again, we need to designate whether that is an under registration or an over registration. In most cases for a retail system, that is going to be an under registration there. All right, see one question in the chat, is there a place to put some comments? And yes, there are. So I'll show that in just a second, just to scroll down here and system data, cost data, that showing you areas of the light blue cells where you can input information. For notes, if you have notes for the inputs, this button over here, the N, will take you right over to this notes page. And you have areas where you can put notes for the specific input, and over here some notes with respect to the data validity grading, which we'll talk a little bit more in the latter part of this session. But notes for the input derivation, things that you might include here. So this is volume from own sources. Maybe we have 5 wells, 3 of them were active in this reporting year. These are the types of meters that we have on these. We've also even seen folks put in the file path that they use on their own server and their utility to understand where, just some breadcrumbs of where the data is kept, or maybe who owns that data. So, John in operations is the correct point of contact to go to this, or if it's in the billed metered consumption. We've got the correct billing department personnel who's noted in there. So whatever's pertinent to that specific input, this is the place where you can log that in. Interactive data grading. This is how we looked at those gears, the volume, the value, and the validity. This is the process in which we evaluate the validity. So looking at this is the biggest improvement and enhancement that was made in this version of the water audit software. What this will do for each input has its own unique criteria focused around the practices and policies within the system. And then it will have a series of questions here, and each question has its own drop-down box for appropriate responses. So this is volume from own sources. If we went down to billed metered authorized consumption, it has a totally different set of criteria, all specific to that input of billed metered authorized consumption. This banner up here at the top, when we're looking at our data validity grades, if anything is in white, that means it needs your attention. that means that we haven't answered all of the questions there. You see, if it's in orange, that means it's already been answered. So you see 3 in orange already, and that's because these 3 inputs: the unbilled, unmetered, authorized consumption, systematic data handling errors, and unauthorized consumption are all inputs where a default option is available. So when we opened up the software, each of those just automatically went to the default. So those are already accounted for there. Again, we'll talk more about data validity grading, but just know this interactive data grading is a huge improvement from the previous version. It's much more transparent and user-friendly to the water auditor. Here's our dashboard tab that Will walked us through. Right now, it's not populated, and it will remain that way until every input and every grade, data validity grade, is assigned, is completed. So if you complete your water audit and you go and it looks like this, then you know that there is something that is incomplete in your water audit. So that's a good gauge to see if you have anything that you've missed. We just hit the notes section. There's a blank sheet in here, so you can see somebody put in some information here. Utility can use this. You can pop anything you want into this blank sheet to help you collect data and share data through this water audit. You can put in test reports here, any helpful notes, tables, supply tables, supply volume tables, consumption volume tables, anything that you think is pertinent in that blank sheet area. And as you populate it, the water balance format will also populate as you move through the water audit. And think of this worksheet as the water balance, but just turned on almost on a vertical, turned up on its end. The loss control planning tab, when you complete the water audit, you'll have a data validity score out of 100, but this is a much more helpful resource to help you understand where you are and what options beyond, what are some of the next steps available to you. So rather than focusing on a specific score, it'll highlight whatever tier you're in. So if after you've assessed all the data validity grades for every input and you have a data validity score of 57, let's say, then this column will be highlighted. And just as a compare and contrast here, you can see that on these lower tiers, which is a-okay to be in one of these lower tiers, it just means that our immediate focus should be more on improving our data. So once we go north of 50 in these tier 3 and above, we're getting a higher confidence in our data, and then we can start to look at more available areas to focus on, such as long-term loss control, target setting, and benchmarking. All right. So we've got some a definitions tab over here. So if you're working in the worksheet and you forget what something is, so maybe you're doing in the system data, you're looking at the length of the customer service line, and you would like a definition of that, it's here. You can even go and view a diagram of what that looks like. And you go back to the definitions tab. Once you're checked off and you have a good understanding of that definition, you can go back to here and it'll take you right back to the worksheet where that input is. All right, and finally here in the acknowledgements, here these are the folks that have put in their blood, sweat, and tears into this version 6 of the software. If you discover any if you have any questions or you see any bugs or anything, then there's some contact information below. Or if you just want to send these folks a note and say good job on version 6, I'm sure they would appreciate it. But that is just a quick overview and and just kind of a tour of the water audit software. We're going to move to actually what it takes to develop the inputs next. So, you know, we're not just going to open up the software and off to the races. We need to collect some of this data and understand the appropriate steps to collect the input here, collect the inputs before we start keying things into the water audit. So we're going to pivot over to that next, but first do want to open it up to the folks on the line. And after giving this preview of the live software, this demonstration, if that brings up any questions that anyone has.
I have a question or two.
Okay.
This is Damon. So with the software here, you know, we have, I'm not sure if Chris covered that we have several systems, you know, in our community. I think we have 12 systems. If we were going to do this, do we have to download this for each of those systems, or does it all compile into one, you know, open at one time and it's all right here, or do we got to create it for each system?
Yep. Great question, Damien. So the water audit is designed to collect information for one separate system. So if you have 11 separate systems that you are managing, you would want to do that, collect this or compile this water audit for each individual system. You may have systems that are interconnected, in which case let us know about that, and we'll see if the conditions are appropriate to combine that. But generally, this is just for one system. Now, you did mention that, and there's several other tribal utilities on the line that it's the same setup. There's multiple systems that they're managing. There is a companion tool to this called the water audit compiler, where once you have a completed water audit for multiple systems, you can compile all of them into this tool. Essentially, it'll just give you some good summary information of all the compiled water audits. It's a good reporting tool and a good way to look at all of your systems. But the first task would be to do this water audit for each individual system. Did that answer your question, Damien?
It did. Thank you.
Okay.
We've got
All
a
right.
hand up.
Yep. Hey, Ross.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the unmute. Quick question. You went over kind of quick on the customer service lines. Is that length of service line? Is that the entire service line, or is that just up to the meter?
All right. So the input that we have here is the average length of the customer service line. So so what we have, well, the preliminary question here is, are meters typically located at the curb stop or the property line? So you have a yes/no indication here. If yes, then that's where that input stops. And if it's no, if the customer meters are typically located, if they're not, then we are tasked with putting that average distance between the property line and the meter. So this is going to look different for each tribal utility, and most likely each system within your utility that you manage. Here's a and this also, that particular input, Ross, along with the rest of the system data, this input goes into helping generate the output data in the dashboard tab. So when we're looking at our losses per connection per day, or our real losses or apparent losses per connection per day, A lot of these system data will help go into calculating that. I'll pause there and see if first if that answered your question, or if there's anything from the Kavanaugh team to add to that.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I'm just trying to, I guess, thinking in my head here, if we have that data on the distance just to the meter. We have data on the length of the entire service line, but I don't know if we specifically have it broken down. So could be a bit of a challenge for us.
Yeah, I can hit that real quick as well, just to add to what Drew was saying, Ross. If the tool, the AWWA tool, already factors in a sort of a standard distance from main to meter. So that's not the distance you have to chase down. And if you're in a warmer climate, if you have a utility network that's in a warmer climate and the meters are at the property line, then this one's easy. There's nothing you have to chase down. You just answer yes to the yes no question, and then this one kind of disappears. The only additional work you need to do is if utility in a colder climate and some or all of the meters are not at the property line, they're inside the building, then you would need to examine and think about what is a typical distance between the property line and the meter that's in the building in that case. So I'd be curious to hear if anybody of our tribal utilities has that scenario where your meters, if you have meters, the customer meters are not at the sort of the edge of the property, if they're in the building or in the facility. Anybody have that? And you can throw it in the chat or come
Well,
on.
we had this, but
I was just going to say that, you know, Pachunga, we do have a few of those instances when we're talking about like the hotel tower, cooling towers, things like that, where our meters are located in a few of their facilities.
Mm-hmm. If it's a few and the exception rather than the rule, it's much less important. But if it's all or half of your customers are metered inside the building, that's definitely something that you'd want to take a closer look at. Ross, what was the scenario you were thinking about?
I was just going to indicate that in some of our areas, we don't even have a property line. There's no designated property line necessarily for some of the homes in some of these tribal communities.
Yeah.
They're just homes, or there's no it's not a street, curb, gutter, sidewalk kind of layout. It's literally a village, where homes are facing different directions, and there's no rhyme or reason. Our housing department is starting to develop more subdivisions within the nation, and those will be more like what you would see in a typical city. But
yeah,
we have some very long service lines where people have have put in 500 or 1,000 feet of pipeline to get to their home.
No, that's actually very helpful to hear. And what we got in this with this group of utilities is probably some boundary cases where it's not the typical setup. And so what I would say is each of our coaches, when we're doing the sort of the one-on-one time together, working with you on helping to look at that, we'll do that and kind of understand your situation and give you guidance on how you'd want to either make estimates or make calculations for that given situation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Drew, if you'll go ahead and click me on screen share privileges, I'd be happy to pick up and while we're seeing if there's any other questions.
Great. All right. Any other questions that brought up before we move to developing the inputs? All right.
All right. Really, really good discussion so far. So let's go ahead and start thinking about how you do the math to get from some source information, some raw data, and translate that into what you're going to key into this free water audit software working with the AWWA tool. It really deals with a couple different interactions. One is the actual inputs that are on the center part of the worksheet. And the second major part is the data grading. And our overall approach is going to be typically work on developing the inputs, and then as you go, as you put that information together, there are going to be a series of questions that it prompts you to answer about the quality of the sources of that data and how reliable. And again, some data may be more reliable, some may be less reliable. In most cases, no data is perfect, and so we're just trying to get a sense of where on the reliability spectrum this information falls, because the inputs dictate the outputs, and so more reliable inputs are going to dictate more reliable outputs. Drew talked us through the time period that's an important parameter to make sure we're clear on when we start, and the units of measure, which is an important parameter to be clear on when we start. But the basic approach is kind of three steps. You gather your info, you use that info to do the math, and then you key it into the audit and check the metrics. Let's see if what we keyed into the audit is giving us some outputs that generally make sense. So a bit of we like to call it the sanity check, and we do it regularly. It really is a helpful thing to see if the way things are coming out is telling us that maybe something going in is off in some way. So let's talk about how we start the process and supporting documentation. And this is really the information behind. You might have a single number that goes into the water we produce in the audit, but the supporting documentation helps tell the story behind that. And it's always preferred to work in a format where you can manipulate and better analyze the information. So scanned handwritten records are not quite as preferable as something that's in, say, an Excel format. And that's not just for working with us as coaches, but that's just for your use in an ongoing manner. It's easier to do quality control if you've got things in a format where it's easier to check the math and to confirm how things are being totaled up, what's included, what's not included, that kind of stuff. So that also helps to provide a place to document any exceptions or additional things that you did in, and maybe it was we added up 12 months from that one well, but then well number 2 we only had 10 months because we had a couple months where the data got corrupted or there was some issue with it. So in that case, we had to make an estimate in September and October. Well, that's exactly the kind of note you would want to include in your supporting documentation and supporting data, just so it goes with it, and that needs to be factored in when assessing the data validity grades. So we do have a prescription or a prescriptive list of the types of supporting docs that are needed when you're putting your audit together. And we have some that you really want to make sure you get in all cases, and then in others that are nice to have, good practice to have, and you may or may not always have them available, but you try to get them if you can. So let's kind of take a look at some examples of those. I'll narrate this for just a moment, and then we'll look at these examples. But we've got supply volumes. Those are very helpful to break down by month and also by meter. And now tie this back to what we talked about yesterday when we were defining the boundary meters. This is really only relevant for those boundary meters, and we want to be able to understand and see what volume is being delivered through each boundary meter, and that'll get us to some of the data validity questions. We'll ask you which meters are carrying most of the load, and if you have multiple meters, that does matter. It does come into play. Same deal for imports and exports, month by meter, if you have those. If you're doing any testing activity, and I would say also any calibration activity on the electronic signal, records of those, it's important to keep those and keep them with your water audit, because the information that's included on those reports becomes very important. And then finally, on authorized consumption, a breakdown of that consumption by month and by use type. we got a flavor of that a little bit yesterday in some examples, but we're going to get a closer look today. The rest of this, in addition to the system schematic, which we spent some good time on yesterday, talking about system by system, what your boundary meter situation is and how that feeds in. So it's so important that if there's not one already in existence, we draw it. We work together to draw it. A picture is very important to link the data to the layout, to what's happening in the field. The rest of these are just derivations. It's showing the math and including the math and how you came up with some of the inputs. So when you are preparing your water audit information, bottom line, show your work, keep it all together in one place if you can, and that's good for posterity. And this could be helpful for you when you pick it back up to do it again next year. Maybe you have somebody coming along that's understudy, and maybe you're in a different role next year and somebody else is the quarterback on the audit. So with that, let's take a quick peek at some examples of what these look like, assembling those supporting documents. First thing we can look at, system schematic. I actually don't think we need to look too closely here because we all got a real good chance to get hands-on with this yesterday. The key takeaways from that yesterday were clear identification of where those boundary meters are on the system relative to distribution. Here's a simple example where we've got good indication of an export meter location. We see that the treated water meter sits after the plant. In this case, we've got raw import. So it's good to know that we've got a raw water meter there, but then we make our decision to use this one as an example, as the boundary meter to start. So the boundary meters would be here and here, and we'd have two boundary meters. We also have a well field contributing, and we would indicate meters at the wellhead, or maybe there's a meter at the well field. Maybe there's a combined meter or a combined flow meter leaving the entire well field, in which case we'd have 1, 2, 3 boundary meters. If it's at each wellhead, we'd have 1, 2, 6 boundary meters. So that schematic becomes very important to tie everything together, and worth emphasizing. Volume from owned sources. This is a good example of broken down by meter by month. In this case, 3 supply meters, and we've got it by month. As a good practice, we actually oftentimes will add or include a couple months prior to the audit period and a couple months after the audit period, just to have that data. It's good to see the shoulders of the audit year, and we want to put it in the chart, maybe visualize the pattern. And in some cases that can help inform if something looks irregular. So that's a good example there. I think we looked at this example yesterday on authorized consumption, and we had January through December. So again, broken down by month and broken out by use type. This type of data, I would be very interested to see sort of what format it's naturally available in for our tribal utilities. In some cases, it may be that you may bill just at one code, and so you may not have separation of use types, maybe between residential customers or commercial customers. So it really kind of depends on how you're tracking the data already. A reminder that we're going to work with the data whatever format you've got it in. So if yours doesn't look exactly like this, that's okay. But if you have the ability to separate it into the use types, that's helpful and can be helpful for the process. Here below, we see an example of these volumes that are not actually broken out by month, but broken out by type. And it may be that we have a tracking sheet that's not doing it by month, but we just have a running total. So sometimes it's more or less in the desired format, but point is to have it in some format that we can then review and understand one total number that rolls up into consumption in the audit for billed metered consumption, as an example. How does that break down, and what's behind that number? System data deals with miles of main, number of connections, pressure data. Those are the 3 main features or main inputs there. So this can look different from system to system, but here's sort of a basic example. If you don't have an electronic mapping system, you may have to go off of just knowledge, operator knowledge of what miles of main or what length of runs are out there. If you have some sort of digital database or if even GIS, that's great. But if not, again, you kind of work with the data that you have. And if you need to make estimations, that's okay. Cost data, this is one that we'll work together closely with you on. Oftentimes it can be that we work with you to provide some of the just high level numbers, and then we can give you guidance on how to do the calculations using those high level numbers. Ultimately, what you're trying to get to is a single number on retail unit cost of what the customers are charged. If for any of our tribal utilities that are not billing your customers, this would be an NA or a 0. But for those that are charging customers per unit of water consumed, that's what we're trying to get to. And so there are a couple different ways you can skin the cat, as they say. So we'll work through that. But the starting point is how much water is sold at different rates. If it's a single rate and a single rate only, that life is easy, and that keys in just as that rate. That's on the retail side. And then we have the variable production cost. This is the one that is used to value leakage within the system. And in its most basic form, it typically involves adding up what you spend on chemicals, adding up what you spend on pumping. That includes treatment pumping, distribution pumping, and Ross, to your comment earlier, if there is pumping raw water to get it from the source extracted, that pumping cost would roll into this as well.
Hey, Will.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I just noticed Eagle's got a hand up, and I don't know if that's been up. We just want to do a quick pause there.
Okay, thank you. I didn't have the hands in front of my screen, so appreciate that. Eagle, question from you?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, just what would be more important, the customer retail unit cost or the variable production cost? I mean, we charge for water on our commercial side, but not on the residential side. There's a couple complexities there too, because we don't pay for power at our well sites. It's all supplied by the cogen plant at the casino. So which one? Because one of the things I'm interested in is really trying to understand the value of and where I should look for water loss. And how much of that resources do I commit to looking for that lost water in those particular zones?
Yeah, so the answer to your question is you need to derive both of these inputs to get to the outputs of the audit, which will tell you the volumes and costs of both apparent and real losses. That will then enable you to answer which one's more important. So you may have a scenario where, because you're not you don't have a variable cost on power, the casino covers that, and so that you may just have maybe chemical treatments, and so your leakage may end up being, on a unit basis, may end up being cheap, and your bigger issue may be apparent losses that are related to, and it would in your case sound like just be the commercial accounts, because the residential accounts are not billed on a unit basis for consumption. So you really need to get to these inputs, the VPC and the customer retail unit cost, get those, and again, we'll work together given your specific circumstances on how to calculate those correctly. But you do that, and then the audit will tell you which one is your more expensive issue and which one you should prioritize.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. I'm loving that we've got a lot of kind of atypical scenarios here. And so this is going to be very interesting as each coach is working with each tribal utility to essentially adapt this M36 methodology for your specific situation. All right, Steve, Drew, Larry, thanks for keeping an eye on the chat and the hands raised. Stop me if anybody else has one come up. All right, We talked about the must-have documents on the and the good to have. So generally anything that deals with volumes, those are the must-have. Documentation of supply volumes, documentation of consumption volumes, and test reports were the other ones we named in there. Good to have docs, system schematic, and just how you did your math. If you're doing your math, making sure you're keeping that all in one place. Developing the data inputs, the basic philosophy is to build it from those supporting documents. And as you're doing it, keep an eye out for errors. So we really want to be on the lookout for errors. We affectionately call them gremlins. Gremlins being anything that are introducing error into your water balance. And we want to be careful that we're not, there's no human error that's contributing to that. But typically the gremlins that we're looking for is not human error. It is stuff that's underlying. It's sort of embedded in the data. You want to keep a lookout. So as we do it, we're going to give you some guidance on what types of things to do to look for those errors, typical pitfalls, that kind of thing. So here's a good example to get us started. Developing the input for our volume from owned sources. You would want to trace it from the production reports. And I think I've heard a couple folks mention you record your well volumes daily or your water plant volumes daily, and maybe then that gets to a monthly operating report. And so that's typically the type of report you're going to go to and pull this for the annual audit. Reminder that the annual audit is a retrospective activity. You're always looking back and pulling from archived information. And so pulling those together, what you're looking for is missing your extra volumes, making sure we've got 12 months, not 11 or 13, making sure we're confident on all boundary meters are included and no non-boundary meters are included. Mismatched time frame, make sure we've got very specifically tied to the audit period in whatever it may be. If it's calendar year, it's January 1 to December 31st. If we're doing an error adjustment over here on the supply, we want to make sure we've got a correct designation of over versus under. And if we have made a calculation for the error adjustment, we want to make sure we're doing it on a weighted average if we have multiple meters. And we're not doing a simple average. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. You'll get to practice that in some of our exercises. Where do the potential errors come from? Where do those gremlins potentially come from? And that's really something that's I think the industry is doing a lot better job of today than even maybe 5 to 10 years ago, of acknowledging that there's a lot of opportunity for these supply numbers to be wrong on their own. This is not human error. This is systematic and sort of embedded issues that are there. And the ones we probably are used to thinking about is meters that wear out. We got our supply meter. It's a turbine meter. It's been in there for 30 years. It's natural to expect that it may slow down. But these others are a little bit less intuitive, and these kind of issues that we can run into. Meter location can contribute to some interesting stories like this one, where the meter was located too close to a check valve that was coming off the pumped source. And the meter itself actually was new, and it had come off the bench testing at almost 100%. But when it was tested in the field using an in situ test, the accuracy results were crazy high. It was over 140% registration, so over 40% fast. And it ended up being related to this issue that the check valve positioning, pumping in, caused the speed of the water at the bottom of the pipe column to be the fastest. Typically, this fastest water is in the middle, and this is not the case. And so the turbine meter was not designed to functionally operate correctly in those conditions. And bottom line is, if you had just gone off the manufacturer's test at the bench, and Eagle, I think this came up in one of our chats yesterday in the breakout. This is actually a great example of why in situ tests are critical versus taking it out and sending it somewhere else, because the in situ test gives you insight into how a meter is performing in its installed conditions. So in this case, it wasn't the meter that was the problem, it was the installed conditions that were the problem. So that can contribute to error. Another one, if we have any of our data connected to a SCADA system and we have any period of any time that the communication between the meter reads and the SCADA are interrupted. It could be a power outage, lightning strike, planned maintenance, and any of the above. And if it's a zero, if the communication stops, water continues to flow through the meter, but sometimes the SCADA system doesn't know that, or it incorrectly thinks that that means it's a zero production period. Sometimes you'll see this in a SCADA file as sort of null values or zero values. And it ends up creating a picture for this particular day. Only 151 units were produced according to the SCADA archives, but in truth, the meter actually saw over 200. So this can cause the supply number to inappropriately be understated. So these are data transfer issues. We haven't talked a lot about how many of the tribal utilities are set up on SCADA, but if you are, and you have this recording in any way, this is an issue you want to look out for. So that's on the supply side. Those are some typical gremlins we're always on the lookout for. On the consumption side, the inputs, developing those inputs, typically it's from your billing reports, whatever billing tool you're using, software, or whatever system you're using. That's where the consumption data typically gets archived. For those that are not metered and or not billed, it may look different, and so we'll look forward to talking with you specifically about those circumstances and okay, what's the basis for making estimations, and we'll work together on that. Typical things you want to look for when you're compiling those numbers. Double counting, if you have something that is treated as an export up here on the top section in supply, you just want to make certain that it's not also counted in the billed metered. Otherwise, it would be double counted. So that's something we're always on the lookout for. If you have any unbilled consumption, and Eagle, I think you mentioned the one where residential is not billed, but commercial is. So you're going to have some volume in this box, and you're probably going to have some volume in this box or this box. So you've got some unbilled consumption. We just want to make sure we're not overlapping when we're accounting for these different boxes. And then finally, leaks and breaks should not be included in this category of unbilled, unmetered. We definitely named some good examples: firefighting, flushing for any reason. But if we are estimating water lost due to leaks, then we are going to need to exclude that. We do not want to include that in this input because it's not an authorized consumption. Again, those potential errors we're looking for: duplication of volumes, making sure that nothing that shouldn't be in there is getting in there. If you have any reclaimed water that is tracked, for example, in your billing software, and you go to your billing software and you click a button to, hey, let's run a report for all the water we sold last year, it's probably going to, unless you tell it differently, it's probably going to include those reclaimed volumes. And then you want to be real clear that we then exclude them out, because that's not part of the potable water audit. Mismatched timeframes is the last one. We won't dive too deep into that today, but just to acknowledge that there is a natural discrepancy between how often we may read customer meters and how often we read supply meters. So we're probably not going to get the exact 365-day period if we're just going off of customer meter reads. So sometimes if we have enough information, we can do a correction for that. If not, we can just note that was not corrected for, and that may be factoring in to potential error in the audit. Last couple sections are system data and cost data, and this information is typically coming from any mapping you have, paper maps all the way up to more digital-based inventory. Accounts of service connections might be from mapping. It also might be from a customer inventory, like a billing system might have this inventory. It may be in a 3-ring binder somewhere. It just really can vary, but typically that information is tracked in some way, shape, or form. Operating pressure, this one is an important one that's used to model out for your specific system a technical minimum volume of leakage. That's the Jeopardy answer of unavoidable annual real loss for 40 points. That operating pressure, that's intended to be the average across the network that's being audited. So that may be from data, that may be from operator knowledge, but either way, that's what that's after. Finally, we have cost data, operating costs as a total operating cost for the water system. This actually has been relegated to an optional input, so we'll probably work with you to at least get a placeholder for this, but we put less attention on that one. And for the reasons that we just talked about on assessing value of apparent loss and assessing the value of leakage or real loss, we work closely to make sure we've got a good handle on what truly is the average unit charge you're charging for the next unit of water to your customers, and what is truly the marginal cost to produce the next unit of water, because that is what is driving your cost of leakage. So once you've developed those inputs, look for those gremlins that we're always looking, and sometimes it feels like whack-a-mole, but once you start to think about them, you then start to look for them everywhere, and it actually becomes a bit more intuitive. Once you have that, then it becomes a sanity check of the metrics again, and you're really looking to see if those are inside typical ranges, and those again are now easy to see. We've got a nice speedometer, set of speedometers, and we can quickly see if it's inside typical ranges as if it's between the low and the high end of the speedometer. If we get something that's outside of that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but it's a pretty good flag that we may have something we missed or something that we need to dig a little bit more for. Certainly, if we get to a metric that is showing negative loss, that's a guarantee that there's some error somewhere, and that's that's a pretty strong flag. So you may run into that, and we'll work together if you do run into that. Low, mid, and high, those are sometimes the considerations, even if it is inside this range, if it's on the high end of the range, but that's not what we'd expect. Maybe it's a system that was just put in, and we've got a good, robust water loss program, and we just weren't expecting that it would be crazy high. Sometimes that's a flag too, because that doesn't reconcile with what our water loss management practices are. And of course, it can go the other way as well. So Drew, I've got half past the hour, and I think that gets us to maybe a pause point on this segment. So I'll ask you if you wanted to do a Kahoot check-in or something else before we do that.
Will, I always want to do a Kahoot check-in.
I should have asked that question.
We will do two quick quiz questions to test our knowledge, and then we'll have a quick or a 10-minute break so everybody can stretch their legs. So let me get this teed up here, and I've got two questions, and I believe I have set it up this time, guys, to where you only need to enter the PIN once, as opposed to for each question the way we had it set up yesterday. So let's see, share screen. There we go. All right. So if you'll recall, go ahead and get, if you have a separate mobile device or if you're using another tab in your browser, the address to go to is kahoot.it that I just popped into the chat. So just have that ready, and I'll go ahead and launch the first question here, and it'll give us our PIN. All right, so our PIN here is 9325850. So just two short questions to test our knowledge here. All right. I think that, all right, got time there. Great. All right, I think 13 was the magic number last time also. Okay, somebody's coming in as M36. All right, and there's Lisa. Okay, we'll go ahead and open this one up. All right, on developing the inputs. So which of the following is not one of the 3 steps to follow when developing the water audit inputs? Okay, great. So most people got that one right. So Will just walked us through these 3 steps of when we're ready. When we're ready to use the audit, we need to first assemble that supporting documentation, supply data, consumption data. It's going to look different for every utility, but we need to assemble that supporting documentation before we're ready to start plugging it into the to the water audit software. Developing those data inputs and always checking the metrics to make sure, just as a sanity check, to make sure nothing is too far out of range there. Level 1 validation is a part of this whole process, but is a process that is done after the water audit has been completed, and it's a practice with a third party to evaluate that the water audit, looking to make sure it's correct, applying the M36 methodology, and assessing those data validity grades. All right, good job, guys. Okay, all right, Trish, you're the front runner here, so let's see if we can keep it going. All right, so next question: which of the following is not a potential error in water supplied? And that is a typo, guys. Which of the following are potential errors in water supplied? Sorry about that. That was an error in Kahoot. There you go. All right, excellent. Meter wear, meter selection, even location of the meter install, all likely potential errors in our water supplied volume. Okay, great job, guys. So we're going to, at this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Hey, guys, for those of you that are back on time, thank you for being here. We're going to give a couple more minutes. We realize that everybody's been sitting for quite a while. So we're going to give a few more minutes, probably push it another 3 or 4 minutes. We'll ping back to you in just a minute.
All right, we'll give just one more minute for everybody to find their way back to their desk before teeing up the breakout exercise. All right. Hope everybody has found their way back now, and we are looking to kick off our common exercise here. All right. Okay, great. So,
Hey, Drew, just a quick comment. Maybe folks that have not been able to download the software to get it up on their screen to maybe drop a note into the chat, and then we can kind of one-off try to help.
okay. All right. All right. Yes.
Come on, Ron.